Morai Rabotai, we're continuing on Masechet Avodah Zarah, and we are on Daf Chaf Bet Amud Aleph, the bottom of the Amud. We basically finished reading the wordings of the first parak, but we're coming back now to just explain the last piece over here with the Tosafot. Today's Amud is being learned. Nitzchud Yehoshua ben Diana, Yael bat Rivka, Menashe ben Asi. Today's Amud is also being learned. Leilui Nishmat Tzipora bat Yitzchak, Leilui Nishmat Menashe ben Yaakov. Also, Leilui Nishmat Sadaf Simcha bat Faribati Lal Eden, Avraham ben Esther, and Farzaneh Diana bat Victoria, that they should have an Aliyat Neshama. Amen. Amen. So, we mentioned in the last piece of the Gemara, in other words, we spoke about the case that a Jew and a non-Jew have a partnership, and the partnership is from the beginning clarified that you take Shabbat, I take one of the weekdays, and we're good to go. In that case, the Gemara said, it's mutar, because the Jew never had a part in the work of Shabbat, and therefore it's mutar. Whereas, if they clearly had a 50-50, and they did not have any of the divisions that we talked about from the beginning of the partnership, it will be asur. How about stama? So says the Gemara, Tashma, im hitnu mitchila mutar. If they made the Braita said if they made a condition from the beginning, then it's mutar. If they said, this is mine, that's yours, that condition makes it mutar. Hastama asur. You see that stam would be asur. Ema sefa. You see from the sefa of the Braita, not like that. In baule heshbon asur. If they came to make a cheshbon at the very end, right, and they want to do 50-50 in the beginning, they didn't have any, then it's asur. Hastama mutar. In the case of stam would be mutar. From here, the Gemara says you can't have any proof. Now, what's the halacha? So there are those who say that this is a isur d'Rabbanan, and therefore safek. The Gemara has a safek. From the beginning of the Braita is mashma one way, from the end of the Braita is mashma a different way. So therefore, when you have safek in d'Rabbanan, will be safek d'Rabbanan lekula. That's what the Rosh says, for instance, Rabbeinu Asher, and the Rif and the Rambam, they don't bring the safek of the Gemara the way it is. The Rif seems to just say that if they made a Tanai from the beginning, it will be mutar. That's all he says from this Gemara, which indicates, right, that if they didn't, stam will be asur. Rambam seems to paskin like that as well. So there is a machloket rishonim as to what the halacha would be in the case of stam over here as well.
What is the scenario of stam again?
Scenario of stam is they did not make any condition. They are, let's say, 50-50 partners, and they started the business without any clarification. They bought something together as partners, as they do all their business, but this business works on Shabbat. So what they did was the goy worked on Shabbat. The Yid, of course, did not work, and they had no clarification that I am working one day and getting the schar of that day. You're working on Shabbat and you're getting the schar of Shabbat. There's no condition made to begin with. Now, that basically is the Gemara. The Tosafot has a very interesting question. In the time of Rabbeinu Tam, the time of the Rishonim, again, Rabbeinu Tam is a grandson of Rashi. Rashi only had daughters, but his daughters married very important people, and some of the major names in Baalei Tosafot, the first generation of Baalei Tosafot, were the grandsons of Rashi. So Rabbeinu Tam his name is Rabbeinu Yaakov ben Meir, and Yaakov was Ish Tam, so it's called Rabbeinu Yaakov as Rabbeinu Tam. Now, the reason that they didn't call him Rabbeinu Yaakov, that would be Rashi Tevot would be Resh Yud. We already had an older Baalei Tosafot, which is Rabbeinu Yitzchak HaZaken. It's called the Ri. You'll see right now in the Tosafot, the Ri over here, so that would be misleading. So we have Rabbeinu Tam. So says the Tosafot, there was a case that a Jew was owed money by a goy, and when he went to collect, the guy didn't have money, but the guy had a bakery, had a tanur, the goy, and he collected the tanur, the bakery business, as his debt. But now the baker is still, the goy is still working there, and he's getting schar. So instead of paying him schar, what he wanted to do was, you work on Shabbat and you keep the whole schar for Shabbat, Hazak u'baruch, and I am the owner of the business, and I keep the rest of the week. So Ri Azaken, Rabbeinu Yitzchak Azaken, which we just mentioned right now, he wanted to be Mekel. Said this is mutar. Why is this mutar? Said the Ri, because the case of the field, the aris that we spoke about, right? The case of the aris with the field and the produce is worse than the case of tanur. What's worse about it? So when I work on a field today on Shabbat, this act that I do working on the field today on Shabbat enhances the produce and the land today, and it enhances the produce and the land also for tomorrow. It's not just that today's work is today's work. You take care of the land, you take care of the produce, and they're good for today, they get better for tomorrow as well with the act of Shabbat. So therefore Shabbat is very much involved with, the work on Shabbat is very much involved with the growth and the productivity of the land in the weekdays as well. But in the case of the tanur, you turn on the tanur today, you stick some bread, and when you're finished today on Shabbat, has nothing to do with Sunday or Friday. You made some stuff on Shabbat, you made some money on Shabbat, Hazak Baruch. So says Ri Azaken, therefore, when he works on Shabbat, the aris on the land, he's working for me on Sunday as well. Because his melacha enhances the land, enhances the produce for Sunday. So I benefit from it directly or indirectly. But when the goy works on the tanur on Shabbat, has nothing to do with me, right? So therefore it's mutar. That's what the Ri wanted to say. Rabbeinu Tam disagreed with him. And if you take a look at the Tosafot, it says, Lo ולא הודה רבנו תם לזה, ונראה לו דעה לחלק בין תנור לשדה. He says there's no difference between the land and the case of the tanur. דאף על פי שאינו משבח במלאכה בשבת מכל מקום, הווה כאילו מעמיד פועל בידיים. Says the Tosafot, Rabbeinu Tam said it has nothing to do with whether or not you're benefiting Sunday's work with work on Shabbat. This is like me standing over there, an agent for me, because see how it works is I own the business, he is a worker, and I have to pay him for the 6 days of the week that he works for me. And when I tell him, okay, so you work on Shabbat and you take the whole schar, that's someone that I have as my worker basically on Shabbat. Because even though that he is getting the payment on Shabbat, he's really making up the payment after give. So it's ma'amid poel beyadayim. I am deliberately making someone work on Shabbat. Now it's not for me, but it is for me. It's not for me, you think, because he keeps all the money of Shabbat, but it is for me because I am chosech. I am saving the money that I would have to give him on the weekdays. Right? So therefore Rabbeinu Tam said, no way. Now, there is Rabbeinu Elchanan, the Tosafot in Avodah Zarah is filled with Rabbeinu Elchanan. One of the Baalei Tosafot, Rabbeinu Elchanan, you don't see him mentioned many times in other Masechtot, but in Masechet Avodah Zarah is mentioned all the time. Rabbeinu Elchanan, he said Tanur is even worse than the Sadeh. So you see all the spectrum over here. So you know why it's worse than the Sadeh? Very simple. In the Tanur, even if you made a condition from the very beginning, still it doesn't work. You know why? here is not like a 50-50 partnership. Remember, in the case of previous Gemarot, we said Goy, and the case that we started the Amud with, right? It was Hanahu Garmina. It was the case of the two people who bought the field together. Hanahu Morikai, the Oved Kochavim Nakid B'Shabbata. There were two partners of Jew and a Yid and a Goy. But here he collected the entire tanur, the entire bakery for his debt. So who is the owner? The Jew is the owner, 100% owner. So the Goy is working. It's like when you tell him you work on Shabbat and you keep your payment, that is like me having a bathhouse and renting it on Shabbat. It's my business. I'm renting it to you on Shabbat, and in the schar of you having it on Shabbat, you give me all the work, free work that you do for me during the 6 days of the week. And therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan, this is worse than a regular partnership. Because it's my business, we're not partners really. He's working for me, and it's like I am renting my tanur to him on Shabbat. Because it's no longer partnership here, but it is him working for me who I am the 100% owner. Fine, says the Gemara. So this is the three-way machloket, and then the Tosafot says ve'gamri chazar bo. The Rabbeinu Yitzchak, the first shita who wanted to be mekel, that's only in the beginning. Later on, even the Rabbeinu Yitzchak said, you know what? This is not going to be mutar. And not only he retracted, he found a reason from the Gemara, a proof from the Gemara, like Rabbeinu Tam to be machmir. He brought a proof for Rabbeinu Tam that there's no difference between a field and a tanur, and therefore you have to be mahmir. Remember what we had the case of the Gemara, that if a Jew owns a merchatz, a public bathhouse, right? Then what's the halacha? Can you have a goy work there on Shabbat? No. Why? So said the Gemara, because it's nikra al shemo. People know that this is the tanur ave, the merchatz ave of a Jew. So says the Tosafot. Ubetosefta de Masechet Demai, Tanya, in the Tosefta of Demai, says clearly black and white, Yisrael ve'ovet kochavim shelakhu sadeh umerchas beshutafut, lo yomar lo Yisrael ve'ovet kochavim, and it says in the Tosefta that you cannot have a Jew have the goy work the sadeh and the tanur on Shabbat, and therefore you have a clear Tosefta that if you compare the tanur and merchatz together, it will be asur. So that's the case of the Tosafot. So you see, the reason I'm saying this is, you see, within one case in the Tosafot, there are 3 different shitot of how to deal with it, right? And these are the nuance cases when it comes to partnership of a Jew and a non-Jew. People sometimes take this lightly. They own a business that produces on Shabbat. It has to be staying open on Shabbat. And they're like, oh, I signed something I found online, and I signed it with the Goy, and Shalom al Yisrael. It's not like, it does not work like that necessarily. You have to be speaking to a legitimate source of halakha, and many times these documents have to be drafted for every case by itself. Famous that Moshe Feinstein did not want to write any of these contracts with the goyim. What he did personally in his private life is a different story, what the family and the students say about it, but he never wanted to write a heter in his tshuvot about this case, because
People find loopholes?
It's not only that. Like, for instance, I tell you, Rav Moshe Heinemann of Star K, they actually have this a lot. It was a business in Los Angeles that wanted to go Star K, and they had to work on Shabbat. And the way they wanted to do was, one of the workers in the store would be the owner of the business on Shabbat. And the Star K rejected it because the guy that was supposed to be the partner was just a simple, wasn't the janitor, but was one of the simple workers in this store. And the policy of Star K is they have to be a CEO, they have to be a shareholder. They have to be. It has to be a serious partnership. You can't just do a loophole. Correct. It has to be something of serious partnership for it to actually work on these things. Again, these are more and more complicated when people have online or overseas businesses. When you have, let's say, companies with virtual work and so on, many of these things have customer service, have different elements of business that has to be running 24/7. You can't just say, well, we're not going to have customer service on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So that becomes, of course, a much bigger challenge of how to deal with them, and this becomes an increasingly more important sugya to delve in and to study because of the complexity of our business law and the reality of the world that has to run 24/7. Now, even online businesses, turning them off on Shabbat is not so simple. Now, there you have 6 potential problems with having an online business, which is nothing really new, because you had vending machines always, right? Can you have a vending machine that works for you and makes money on Shabbat? That's the question, right? Can you make passive money on Shabbat? Now, the case of the websites and online transactions is a little bit more complicated than vending machines, of course, but the core element of it is very similar, and that there you find a machloket as well, which Meikar Adin, there's certainly room to be mekel on all those 6 issues, but at the same time you have very many Yerushalayim companies that they turn it down on Shabbat. You have, for instance, the B&H Electronics that's owned by Hasidim, one of the most successful electronic stores in New York and online. And if you try to buy anything from them on Shabbat, the site is down. They don't have online business either on Shabbat and Yom Tov, and that's a tremendous thing that they do. I mean, ArtScroll is off on Shabbat as well, but you would imagine ArtScroll, Jews buy from ArtScroll, even though that's not really true. The biggest customer of the ArtScroll Gemaras are Koreans, yes, because they have 5 million people that they have part of their curriculum that they have to learn Gemara, right? That's they think the Jewish genius is all encapsulated in learning Gemara. I actually had sitting in a kollel a number of years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and there were a group of Koreans setting up cameras and trying to video the kollel and interview people. So I went over to one of them. I was like, "What are you doing in a kollel?" I thought they were hired by the kollel, but it was evident soon that it was not the case. So he said, "Look, we have studied. The Jews have 24+% of the Nobel Prizes, and they're like 0.02% of the society, not even. And the Jewish genius, we have been wondering what is the secret of it, and we concluded it's because they learn Talmud, right?" It's pretty actually amazing. So they actually are probably the biggest customers of the ArtScroll printing, but nevertheless, ArtScroll is off on Shabbat if you try to shop from our scroll. Now, that being said, we're going to start the Mishnah in the second parak, B'ezrat Hashem. אין מעמידים בהמה בפונדקאות של עובדי כוכבים, מפני שחשודין על הרביעה, ולא תתייחד אישה עמהן, מפני שחשודין על האריות, ולא יתייחד אדם עמהן, מפני שחשודין על שפיכות דמים. Now, we spoke about the business interactions before and surrounding the practices of idolatry that the Goyim had in the first parak. The second parak, we start dealing with our interpersonal relationship with the Goyim as far as the physical interactions are concerned. Can you leave your animal with a Goy? Can you have yichud with a Goy, right? So we have laws of yichud, of course, pertaining Jewish community at the end of Masechet Kiddushin, and Daf Pei and Pei Aleph, right? Which there we are not necessarily concerned about ones, we're not concerned about rape, we are more concerned about a situation leading into a immoral act, which would not be ones, but would be more a situation conducive to an immoral setting. But by Goyim, you have a different setup because of the different mindset and culture. So there are three things that the Mishnah talks about. One is a cohabitation with, well, that word is used differently in farm life, but in our purposes it means tashmish with animals that the Goyim have, and also the yichud of a woman, חשודין על הערבייה, ולא תתייחד אישה עמהן מפני שחשודין על העריות. They are also suspected on issues of morality and arayot. Also, a man with man לא יתייחד because חשודין על שפיכות דמים. It could be even because of murder. Now, first of all, we're going to discuss a lot of very interesting things in this perek about the intimate relationship with animals. And now there's again a person in a city life would be very surprised, but even as a few years ago, I'm not sure if anything has changed, maybe it's becoming worse or better, I'm not sure, but something around 2013, 2015, the rate we're up to of the general society was somewhere close to 10% of society experiencing these types of things within the Goyish culture. So these are 8%, 10%. That's something.
Relationship with animals.
That's correct. So therefore, you see all kinds of different chashashot that the Gemara has, and these are not necessarily things that are out of realm, even for our generation. And you could imagine, perhaps in the farm life of a situation until up at 100 years ago, 98% of the economy business was running by agriculture, which meant a different setting than the city life that we have nowadays. People had more interactions with animals in a regular life, and these things perhaps were even a bigger problem. So hence the concept, you cannot leave your animal with Ovdei Kochavim because they are suspected on Rvi'ah. A woman should not be alone with Ovdei Kochavim because they are suspected on Arayot, and Lo Yitached Adam Imahem, and even a man has to be careful and mindful and not being alone with them. Shechashudin al Shfichut Damim, they are also suspected on Shfichut Damim. If they figure the guy has some money or they have any other reason to want to get rid of him, they are Chashud on Shfichut Damim as well. Therefore, a person should be mindful of those. So says the Gemara, what does that exactly mean? Urmini, lokin me'en behema lekorban. The Braita says that this is in Tosefta, in Perek Bet, that we could buy a behema from an Oved Kochavim for purposes of Korban. Now, a behema that had Revi'ah is pasur for Korban. So you have to make your mind. If you tell me that we are choshesh for Revi'ah, for cohabitation with animals from a goy, so then you should not be able to buy a Korban from them. And if you could buy a Korban from them, that means you're not choshesh. So why can't I leave my animal for 2-3 hours with them? Does not seem to be consistent. So says the Gemara, we're not choshesh, not for the goy sleeping with the animal, the male with female, and not the other way around either. In other words, if you leave a male animal with a female goya, also we're not choshesh. We're not concerned about that. Velo mishum muktzeh, and not also for designating it for Avodah Zarah. So it says, in other words, the goy is going to say, well, this animal, I'm going to shecht it for Avodah Zarah of Baal, right? And then it says, I need some extra cash today. I'm going to sell it to the next buyer, and then I'll find a different korban. But if the owner already designated it for being a korban for Avodah Zarah, that's already muktzeh, right? So says the Gemara, velo mishum ne'evad, and also we're not choshesh that this animal itself was designated to a Hindu family that's going to be worshiping it as a deity. So says the Gemara, Bishtama muktzeh v'nevad, im ita de aksiyeh im ita de parche lo ava mazbineh. The Gemara says, I understand why I'm not concerned about the Avodah Zarah issues of it being a deity, used as a deity, or designated for korban for Avodah Zarah, because had the goy done that, it would have never sold it. They had respect for the Avodah Zarah. So you think a goy is going to dedicate something for korban and then come sell it? No, we're not choshesh for that. He would never sell it to me if he served it as a deity or if he designated it for a korban. It would not happen. But says the Gemara, Ela roveh v'nirba lachush. But how do you know that the goy did not sleep with it? I mean, if you're choshesh that the goyim do these types of things, how in the world can you buy from korban? So says the Gemara, very simple. Amar Rav Tachlifa, Amar Rav Shila, Bar Avina Mishmeh Derav, Oved Kochavim Chas al Behemto Shelo Te'aker. The general belief was, I'm not sure how factual it is nowadays, but the general belief was that a revi'ah with animal, a cohabitation with the animal, would render them a behemah that's nekeva, a behemah that female behemah, would render them incapable of reproduction. It would affect the reproductive system. So therefore, a goy who owns an animal, he says, this is my animal, I'm not going to damage my animal. So it's a financial consideration for them, and they're not going to do it. But if it's not their animal, if you leave an animal for a few days with them, it's not their animal, and therefore they're not going to be concerned about it. Hence, we are very concerned that that's going to happen. Therefore, you cannot leave your animal with them, right? Says the Gemara. By the way, the problem is because animals also, the goyim also are nizhar on cohabitation with animals, right? They have to be min b'mino. It has to be. They have to have a certain bond of proper married life, the way marriage is for them, which Rambam explains is much less restrictive than a Jew, but nevertheless they have to be with the same min. They can't go with animals, even the Bnei Noach, and therefore you causing them to do an Averah, it will be a Lifnei Iver. So says the Gemara, they do not do it with their own animals because of this problem that we just mentioned. But says the Gemara, that's only good that you can't buy a female animal from them. How about a male animal? Right? Male animal, it's not the problem because they're not giving birth. They're not going to lose their reproductive system. Right? So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Kana, ho'il u'makhishan bebasar, it's going to still be a problem because it's true that they don't become akar, they don't become incapable of reproducing, but it ruins their power and their strength. Still, it affects their physical capabilities and their health, and therefore, still, they would not do it with their own animals. So this that you say, if you're getting an animal from a shepherd. Now, shepherd doesn't own necessarily the animals, right? People would give their animals to a professional shepherd to go take care of them, right? Yeah. So if you buy it from the shepherd, it's not his animal. So the Gemara says that you could do also. Says the Gemara, it's not a concern because lichush dilma reva'ah. So the Gemara says, ro'eh shelahen mityareh mishum hefset schar. Tanya, the ro'eh is going to be scared of losing his schar because, as Gemara is going to explain, the goyim know how these things work. We are Jews; we don't think in these terms because for us it's completely asur, and we don't have those moral lower standards. But the goyim themselves are very tuned into these things, and the goy would know right away what's wrong with it, and therefore it will become a problem. Now, the Gemara is going to discuss the other two aspects of the Mishnah as well. B'ezrat Hashem, this is something that we will continue in the days to come.